Hello, and welcome to the Irish Memory Box. The Irish Memory Box is a new way for the Irish community to communicate and learn from each other. It fosters a more vibrant sense of community by connecting people from different generations. Today, I will be talking with Sean O'Dowd. Hi, Sean. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So I guess for the people who don't know you, who might be listening, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Like you said, Sean O'Dowd, resident Chicago, Illinois. I am by trade, by profession, a carpenter. I'm a union carpenter here in Chicago, have been for over 40 years. Or as I say to like young kids starting out now, when they say, how long have I been doing this? I say, since Carter. And then they ask, who's Carter? So that's how long I've been at this. I'm active here in the Irish community in Chicago. I am with the ancient Order of Hibernians, which is the oldest Irish Catholic fraternal organization in the United States.
Can you tell us just a little bit about what the Hibernians do / are?
Like I said, we're the oldest Irish Catholic fraternal order in the United States. We have a big umbrella. We cover a lot of things. One of our mainstays is a peaceful and a united Ireland. That's in our preamble. Another one is a immigration support system that we want an immigration, a larger immigration going through from the United States to Ireland. We have an endowment at the University of Notre Dame. We do Irish studies abroad for high school children. We do grants for college for a semester or 2 semesters in Ireland for Irish studies. These are all things that you can go online and apply for. We do charity programs, whether throughout the whole United States or in the particular areas we work for. Hibernian hunger projects, which again is feeding the homeless, feeding food pantries, which we take off a lot from what happened, during the 1847, 48, 1848, 49, the Great Hunger, where we try to incorporate that into the things that we do here, because that was such a big part of being the Irish nationalism and the Irish face of who we are, what brought so many people here to America. And for so many generations, the people here in America kept sending money home, kept sending things home, parcels back, packages back to help those that they had left behind.
That is very cool. What a long list of amazing things that y'all do. Okay, so this is your now. Let's take it back and talk about growing up. What was it like for you growing up? Well, I guess I should probably ask you, what's your connection to Ireland?
That's the whole growing up part. My father is an immigrant. So, well, when I say part of the AOH is immigration and moving immigration forward, I'm a huge interest in that, huge supporter of proper and legal immigration, because my father was an immigrant. He came over in 1948, as you know. In 1948, Ireland was still a state of, forget how they call it exactly at this point, but it wasn't until 1949 that it became a free state, that it became a republic. So when he left, he was actually technically a citizen of England, So he left under those terms of economic migration. There's no work. It's after World War II. There's not a lot of work for young men. And you had to go somewhere. You had to go to the continent. You had to go to England. You went to Australia. You went to Asia. You went somewhere. He had an uncle in the United States. So he came here. So that's my connection to Ireland. And from there on, it's just been instilled in me growing up, just Irish and all Irish. And if you ever saw the movie My Greek Wedding, all right, the woman in it talked about her father, who everything and anything had been invented by the Greeks. If you talk to my father, everything and anything had been invented by the Irish. You look to document things, and a tremendous amount of things the Irish were responsible for, did have a hand in, did play a part in inventing, whether it was signing the Declaration of Independence, whether there are more Medal of Valor, Medal of Honor winners in the United States Army and United States military forces are Irish than any other nationality, Irish born than any other nationality. So, when he talked about that, and there's a huge sense of pride, huge sense of, honor and everything of being Irish,
Mm-hmm.
So that was just instilled in me in a very young age.
Okay. And did you grow up in like an Irish neighborhood? Did you have a lot of Irish people? Because I'm assuming your father moved to the States and you grew up in the States then.
Yeah, yeah. Um, to answer that, no, we did not grow up in an Irish neighborhood. My father, being a farm boy, moved to the city, the suburbs, or to Galesburg, Illinois, and then he moved to Chicago.
Mm.
When he was in Chicago, he wasn't a big fan of city life. He wasn't a big fan of the city. And at that time, and you've been out here a little bit in Chicago, the suburbs started to boom just after the post-war area. And he
Mm.
bought a house in this little community called Hoffman Estates, which is no longer a little community like so many suburbs out there in the Hoffman Schaumburg area. And he bought a house out there in like 1955, and it was just a small rural community. That's
Mm.
where I was raised. That's where I was born. But we still had a large Irish community here in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
still had all of his relatives. And at that point, he was the first of his first cousins to come over. He was one of the oldest in the group, and so many of them followed him through the 50s, through the 60s. He had aunts and uncles that were here. So there was always the family events, the weddings, the first communion parties, just the parties in general. There seemed to always be parties and celebrations going on that either we went into the city for or people would come out to us in Hoffman. And at that time, I remember them coming out and just saying, "Oh my God, we're in the middle of nowhere," to come out there, especially early on when the expressways were just being built up. The interstate system wasn't what it is now, and you took highways to get out there and stuff. But
Mm.
so we didn't grow up in an Irish community, but we were surrounded by Irish and by Irish friends and Irish people. And my dad had that whole network of people, not just family, but of friends and associates. I can remember as a child being like in the yard or outside playing or something, and my dad would come up and start talking to us and asking questions and stuff. And my dad would walk away, and the kid would just have kids, friends would nod their head and say something, and then look at me and said, "What was your dad saying?" You know, he had that really thick, heavy cabin robe, which he never lost. He never lost that. And for me, growing up and having all that around me and always hearing, especially the cabin accent, the cabin robe, and then a lot of people from Dublin, it just sounded natural to me. If you hear it often enough, you understand it. So to me, it was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about did you ever do any Irish instruments or Irish dancing or anything along those lines?
No, I never played. And I look back at that and almost wish I had at some point. And it was one of those things my mother, who was American born, kept asking us, don't you want to, play in it, guitar lessons, something. And at the time, I was always playing sports. I was very active in sports my whole childhood, whether it was out playing in the yards, pick up baseball games, depending what the season was. It was baseball season, we played baseball. In the fall, we played, football. Late summer, we played football. Then you went into basketball because that was an indoor sport, gymnasiums and stuff. And then you went back to the spring to baseball. So, we're always just rotating around, and it doesn't seem like there was time to pick up an instrument or learn to dance. I look back at that now and just wish I had done, even learn how to sing, because as they say, I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, and I like to sing, but nobody likes to listen to me. I'm good in a chorus if you put me way in the back.
Oh, I'm sure you're great. Okay, cool. So let's talk about then your career. How did you get to be a carpenter? When did you decide that, and what was that like for you?
Again, my father, when he got here, he got in the trades. And I'd often thought about doing other things. But again, in the late 70s, late 70s, early 80s, the United States was in a huge recession. Most of the world was in a huge recession at that point. You had interest rates, which people can't even imagine, at like 10% and higher and 15%. So people weren't buying homes, people weren't buying things, people weren't, there wasn't a lot of just free money out there or access to money like, as during a boom economy is. So I had tried a few other things. I had, had my own plans and what I was going to do. And eventually, none of those were really working well. And my dad said, "You want a job? I can give you a job." And through that, I started working for him, got into trades. At one point, you're always thinking, I'm going to go back to something else and start chasing what I really want to do. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I don't regret any of it because we're in Chicago. I can just drive around. And as my daughter says, yeah, we drive around the city. And my dad just points at buildings and said, I did that. I did that. I did that. And pretty much any carpenter in Chicago or any tradesman in the city almost has their family will almost tell you the same story, that their father insists he built the whole city. So, or mother, whoever it could be now, whatever gender it is, we all kind of have that. But it is true to some extent. I can drive around downtown and just point at all the buildings that I've been in and done something in or worked on, or the newer buildings and that. So
that's pretty awesome. Any roundabout number
of how many?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no.
Too many to count.
Yeah. I've been on projects where they started them, and I've worked on the same project for 18 months or 2 years. I've done 390,000 square foot buildings, 30-story high rises. I've worked on just small little office remodels. There's a huge spectrum there of everything we do. A lot of hospital work. So pretty much any new hospital that's been built in this area in the last 20 years, 25, 30 years, I've either been one point or another on it or near it or something to do with any of the hospitals. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
So, another question for you is, have you ever been to Ireland?
Countless times. And that, if you ask me to count, is probably 16 is the number right now, 16 times.
Oh.
And I think if you figure that out at my age, it's like every 3 years or something. First time, I was 8 going on 9. And my father sent me and I have 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters, and sent us back for the summer to cabin to the farm in Valley James South. And my granddad and granny were still alive. My dad's brother pretty much was running the farm at that point. And he sent us back for 3 months. We left a few days after school ended and came back just enough time for my mom to register us back for school in the fall. All of my cousins, first cousins, which I have over 30, I think there's 34 first cousins in Ireland. I have first cousins my age. I have first cousins 10 years older, 15 years older. I have first cousins 20 years younger. So when you get a big family, as you well know how it is in Ireland, there's a big spectrum in ages between first cousins. And then from that point on, every 2 years, that was 70. Went back in 73, same thing. Went back in 76, same thing. And once I got older, by that time, I had developed a relationship with my first cousins who were my age. So as a young adult, as a young man, I would go back and visit them, and then we would just terrorize basically the west coast of Ireland. Not like there are now. There's no internet, no emails, and you would just travel all day, find a place like a bed and breakfast, check in, and then find the nearest pub, But that 70, 73, and 76 are times that I will never forget. And that was really...
I really want to know about that whole experience. Like, I wish we had like a 6-hour podcast so you could just tell me about the whole time that you were there.
Yeah.
But I guess I do have one question about it, and that would be, was it much different? Like, obviously I know, you were going from suburb Chicago to rural Ireland, but was there anything that was like really different?
Well, the fact that we were out on a farm, and it's definitely a very rural area. There was no phone in that house. Even communications, you went down to the Villas, the creamery, and people left their messages there and got them the next day, type of thing. And that was all the farms in the area. Nobody had phones. The fact that you still saw so many people delivering their cream and delivering their milk to the creamery, to the Villas, with the cart, with the old milk pails on it, either hauled by a horse or a donkey or a mule. Things we did to go into the seaside, the climbing the mountains, to just out having fun. You know, it was just a huge farm and with the animals on it and everything else. It was just an experience we had never had before. I had never experienced that.
Amazing. Like, I'm jealous of the fact that you got to experience Ireland like that. I was only born in 87, so tell me about now, I guess, that what are things that you like to do to celebrate your Irish heritage?
I think educate people on really what it is to be Irish and who the Irish are and what we've done, um, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. That I think is huge, is how I try to celebrate my Irish. Now, granted, there's the St. Patrick's Day party, there's all the events, the dinners, the dances, and I love going to that. I love going to network and talking to people. But at the same time, I really like delivering the message or talking about Ireland to people who don't know that much about it. Yeah, milk comes from a cow, but how do you get it from a cow? Maybe, people, especially like some of your younger listeners and that may not understand exactly how milk comes from a cow or how butter is made, it's churned. My granny used to churn butter, she used to have all the hens and the eggs and that. So, my thing is, how I try to enjoy that is spreading the word of Ireland, um, what we're all about, what we do, and the history. I'm a huge fan of history, whether it's American, whether it's Irish. Um, and I try to look a little bit deeper than just what's put in books or just what's put out in the broad spectrum of what someone says or what's printed or, to hear inside stories, like you said, to be there or know somebody from all those years. I mean, my granddad had these cast of characters that worked for him. There was Matt Segerty, there was Billy Bell, and all these guys. And I know them just by those names to this day. And I was just a child. And they lived in the cottages up on top of the mountains or over the hills or down the lanes. And these were just the thatched cottages with the paraffin lamps, with the open fireplace. And that's how they lived. And they were just bachelors that lived in these cottages. And when they were gone, unfortunately, there's two women, Lizzie and Fanny Henry, that lived atop the mountain. And when they were gone, nobody moved into those houses. Nobody took over, and the roofs just came down on them, and the land around them was sold and just kind of gobbled up by put on the bigger parcels. But to have known that and be able to tell people about that and stories, my dad was a great storyteller. I can't play a guitar, I can't sing a song, but I can tell a story.
So, Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any stories that you could tell us?
I have numerous ones. My first night in Ireland, and this is, of course it's true because why else would I say it? When you're here in the United States and we had pets growing up and you let the dog in at the end of the day, you didn't go to bed and leave the dog outside, you let the dog out. So, here it is. I think maybe my first, maybe second night in Ireland, 8 years old. I'm 8 years old. I turned 9 that summer. And I can tell you how many birthdays I celebrated in Ireland because that's always there in the summer. But the cows have been milked, there's summer, so they bring them in the morning and then they bring them in the evening and they're milked twice a day. In the winter, they're milked once a day or maybe every other day because they're not eating as much good green grass. And these are all grass-fed cows, and which is everybody's into now. And they were doing that way before. They were way ahead of the curve on that in Ireland. But at the end of the night, it was late, and I went up the back path up the trail, up the hill, up the mountain, and on my own, because cows, once you get behind them, they all start moving. I brought them all down and put them in the pen, and then I went in the house and went to bed. Well, the next morning, I guess the uproar, because they had gotten into everything, the cows, because they didn't want to be locked up or anything. And they had gotten over the fence and behind the byre and behind the barn and over the hills. And my granny had a big garden out the front of the house, and they had trashed all that and gone through it. And here she thought, and she didn't yell at me or anything, because she thought, as you say, the little Gosson, the wee Gosson, thought he was putting the cows to bed. That's what I had done, is I had gone up and, and for any kids out there, cows don't have to come in at night. They stay out in the fields. And I did not know that.
That's a great story. Oh my God, Sean. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Do you have any advice for Irish America?
My hope is that they don't lose touch with their Irish nationalism and with what it is to be Irish. And, not just to say I'm Irish on St. Patrick's Day and not to get caught up in all of that, negative spin on being Irish. We are a lot of things, but we're bright, we're educated. You look at what comes out of Ireland, one of the most educated workforces, college educated workforces to come out of Europe. I think people need to do that. There's a stereotype of the Irish that I think people really need to get away from, especially about certain things about our nature and who we are.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, especially with this whole stereotype thing, because like Sean, I'm sure as you can imagine, you're speaking to me now as a Black woman who's born and raised here. Um, there is that stereotype of across the board of, the Irish people. Somebody said, "Oh, I couldn't be Irish. I don't drink beer," and it was just like that's such a bad stereotype that's just portrayed in the movies. Or like I said, the fact that, all Irish people are white with curly red hair and freckles or whatever it may be. I think that's a great message to send out to the people who are listening to us, about changing the stereotype, because you're right. Irish people are more. I think it's just important for the people who are listening to know that we are here on the US side are still working to get rid of stereotypes in the Irish American community, which is awesome and so important for so many members of the community and so many people who, aren't yet members, but still would fall under our umbrella of well, Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and getting to know you a bit more. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you, Grace. I do hope to be in Ireland. I will be there in January and February of 2022 coming up. Yeah, I think that's how that's going to work. I'm all messed up. That 1 year threw me all off. That last 15 months.
The blank year, the year that we don't talk about. For all those who are listening, the year that we're talking about, in case you're listening in the future, the year that we're talking about is 2020, the year of the pandemic and all the disaster that we're now cutting it out. It never happened, right, Sean?
Yeah, the lost year.
Bye, Sean.
Goodbye, Grace. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Irish Memory Box. Thank you so much for tuning in. This last year has been hard for everybody, and we hope that these episodes and these snippets of intergenerational learning and communication have helped you through it. From all of us at Irish Community Services, thanks so much for tuning in.